Hello, so today I want to go over some filtering of power-ups and some hidden rules that might make it easier for you to see a desired power-up on a particular unit. This is particularly potent on Mech Pilot and something that I mentioned in a couple of my guides when talking about trying to hit Mech Pilot and how you can roll more effectively for Mech Pilot on Jarvan, which is going to be the example of this video. Before we get into it, if you like my content, make sure to like and subscribe. You know I'm doing daily TFT guides. I recently just did the best comps and patch notes reviews for the current patch, but this time around I'm going to elaborate on a little bit of that aspect because Mech Pilot, or playing around a particular power up for a Mighty Mech board, is one of the win conditions or really powerful comps on the current patch. So I want to give you guys a little bit of a better footing if you don't already know about these rules. So we're going to look at two different websites. There's basically different filtering websites that you can use. This is Data TFT, which I can show some aspects of in a bit. And then this is also Little Buddy Bot. I always recommend Little Buddy Bot as just having a general information for the entire set. All sorts of things like augment tables, any sort of information you might want to find out about the set. This is a great website that has it. But anyways, there's this part on power-ups. I haven't really gone over it on this channel, but I'm basically just going to read over the 11 simple rules, and then we're going to scroll down and talk a little bit about how we can use those rules in order to thin out the pool or to give ourselves a better chance of certain power-ups. So let's go through it. Right, in terms of our simple rules, basically this is to help make variety, as it said, so that you're not having particular situations where your power-ups are always the same things. It's to try and help you to have an easier time finding a power-up that you like, especially if you're using your power removers. But basically the rules, these 11 rules, there's no repeats between consecutive shops for the same champion. What that means that if you're using a remover on a champion and using that power-up to basically, power-up remover, the 3 that you see, they're going to be new the next time that you see it. I think it's only one time redundant. Next, you cannot offer duplicates in the same shop. So in a shop, obviously you're not going to get 2 of the same power up in that shop. These are the rules that start to become a little bit more tricky, right? Shops 1 and 2 are considered primary, and shop 3 can be primary or secondary. You'll often see these in patch notes or in other websites that will basically say if something is common or primary, they have these extra tags associated with them. For example, Veteran on Janna recently got changed to being a primary fruit. Because before it wasn't a primary fruit, and that just means that it's more likely that it's going to see or more tailored to that unit for particular arbitrary reasons that are made by the dev team or whatever, basically. But this is really important when you're looking for stuff that aren't primary versus primary and how often you can see them. For example, Noxious on Malzahar or Twisted Fate, those would be in a separate category. Either way, avoid triple common shops if possible. So this means it tries not to give you 3 common fruits, which this is another tag that they have. Weight is relative, higher is more likely. Cannot offer more than 1 of each per shop of multiple stacking weird or trait tags. This is just another thing in terms of tags. Like I said, none of these rules really apply that much unless for particular situations, which we're going to talk about through an example with Jarvan. Cannot offer a power-up that's already active on your team unless it has the multiple tag. This rule 7 is going to be a big factor in how we try to thin out the pool, which I'll talk about in a second. Looks at your current board, can bench traits to reduce pool. So this is something that came up in the most previous patches. For example, Star Sailor. If you're looking for Star Guardian 1, if you don't have Star Guardian active on your board and you use your fruit, you won't get offered Star Sailor, right? The same thing with the student, right? For Battle Academia, Star Student, right? You don't get it active if you don't have Battle Academia active. So if you don't want it on your unit, then you would bench the units to try and reduce that option of getting it. The same thing applies with certain traits, like Classy, for example, has a similar rule. This one's really important if you're trying to filter out a particular power-up that is trait tied or related to a certain trait. Duplicate entries of the same power-up on champions do not increase odds. List order matters, and then powers with second power-up tag cannot be offered between before receiving your second power stack. So these are ones that have an upgrade effect. But now we're going to go down to the main thing we want to talk about in this video, which is thinning out the pool, right? The main thing is Rule 7. Right, Rule 7, you cannot be offered a power-up that is already active on one of your units unless it has the multiple tag. E.g., if you currently have Drift Duel, not multiple, active on Lucian, then you cannot get Drift Duel if you try and do that power stacks on Senna. So this one's really important. And then also Rule 8, where it looks at your current board. That's the example I already talked about with Classy and trait power-ups like Star Sailor. If you bench the traits that they're not active, then it can basically toggle that on and off in terms of whether you'll see it or not. Now, let's go into the example that I want to talk about with Jarvan. So on the same Little Buddy website, we also have this really cool tool that you can do to search up power-ups and different conditions, because power-ups are also sometimes locked between different stages and levels and stuff like that, and having the traits active versus having the traits not active. So when you're playing around Mighty Mech, one of the most important fruits that you can get is actually called Mech Pilot. When you're playing around this, right, Mech Pilot, basically, if you don't know, you pilot the mech, it grants you stats, and then 2, the mech benefits from the pilot traits. So basically, when you're playing around Mighty Mech, you want to basically get 7 Mighty Mech active, and then activate Mech Pilot, and then the mech will eat 2 of your units. Usually it'll make it eat Aatrox and Senna, or Aatrox and Lucian, or Aatrox and Gangplank, but basically Aatrox and one other unit, and then you activate the traits that these units have active, and your Mighty Mech will get those traits active. So what's really important is to hit not only Mighty Mech, but you want to hit on both units. But if you hit on one unit, you're guaranteed to hit on the other. So basically go Mighty Mech, Mech Pilot, they get eaten up by the dude, and then it just pops off. And this is like a broken comp in the game. It's basically the best comp in the game. It's absolutely absurd. It's a little bit Yone locked, but this is a really important thing to be able to play around. So how do you go about finding Mech Pilot? Obviously, you can low roll. If you don't hit Mech Pilot and you waste a bunch of fruit removers, then you're going to be in a really bad spot. You don't want to leave that up to chance, or you want to give yourself the best chances of hitting Mech Pilot. So what would be the best chance of hitting Mech Pilot? A lot of times you would think it's something like, you know, either a Gangplank, right? Gangplank, if you look at it on stage 3, that's usually when, stage 4 is usually when you're going for it, right? You're level 7 or level 8. If you're going for Gangplank, right, Mech Pilot, if you look at the odds, it's somewhere between 0 and 25%, depending on like different things that manipulate the shop. Additionally, you know, you can see that's on other units like Lucian and Senna and whatever, right? Senna, it's actually really low odds because it's a secondary fruit, it's not considered a primary, so that's a little bit awkward, right? A lot of times you'll see people roll for it on Lucian, because Lucian's really cheap, he's inexpensive. Something that people used to do is you would buy a unit, and then you would sell the unit, to save your fruit removers, right? So if you don't hit it, you'd sell them, you buy a new one, you put it on, you sell them, you buy a new one, you sell them, etc. Something that's coming up though is the way of filtering. If you see specifically on Jarvan, right? Jarvan actually has a pretty high odds of Mech Pilot, right? If you put Mech Pilot on him, amongst the units, he basically has the highest odds of seeing Mech Pilot. Well, that's really great. But Jarvan's pretty essential. You can't buy, sell Jarvan. He's an expensive unit. So if you want to find Mech Pilot really efficiently, a lot of times the key is to use it on Jarvan in particular, right? This is the example we're going to go through. So you're using on Jarvan to find Mech Pilot. Additionally, Jarvan, by means of the filtering rules that we're not going to use this website, I'm going to use this website, it's a little bit more visual, it's a little bit easier to show, right? If we select Jarvan, like I said, this is data TFT, the other one is a Little Buddy bot, right? This one shows you like the probability of seeing one of them, and then the probability of like how much it can be increased up to. So for example, if we hit Mech Pilot, right? Secondary power up. What this means is that if you already used a fruit remover and you got rid of those first 3 power-ups that we talked about a little bit earlier, then you increase your odds because you're going to see 3 new power-ups. Additionally, the trait activation rules, right? If you don't have strategist activated, boom, you get an extra little percentage by not having strategist active on your board. So if you're looking for Mech Pilot on Jarvan, you want to make sure that you're not putting your Rise or another strategist on your board, because then you could be offered classy just by nature of that. Maybe they changed the rules, I'm not sure if it's completely updated, but basically just don't have any other traits active. Now you do have to have Mighty Mech active, of course. If you don't have Mighty Mech active, same thing applies. You will not get offered Mech Pilots. You want to have Mighty Mech active on your board, but you don't want to have Strategist active on your board. But this is the part where it gets really interesting. You can see stuff like Strong Spark activated, or Corrosive activated, or Spiky Shell activated, or Resistant activated. Now what does this mean? Right? What does this mean? Or Robo Ranger activated, right? The thing is, when we said, like, you know, certain power-ups, if they are active, it will basically block out, because there's certain power-ups where if they're not classified as multiple, having it active on your board means that you won't get offered another one on your board. So for example, let's consider Strong Spark. If you are to find a tank unit that has Strong Spark, and you were to use one of your fruits, because you have 2 fruits on that unit, then Jarvan will not be able to get Strong Spark, because you can only have 1 Strong Spark unit on your board. So for example, it can be on your bench as well, but let's say, you know, Rammus or I guess Kennen, it was the example, right? Kennen has the ability to activate Strong Spark. So if you want to increase your odds for Jarvan to hit Mighty Mech, if you put the Strong Spark fruit on Kennen, where's my fruits? Right? Then when you roll your fruit on Jarvan, right? If I take a new fruit and I roll it on Jarvan, I'm now increasing my odds of seeing the Mighty Mech fruit, the Mech Pilot fruit, because I have Strong Spark activated. And as you can see, you basically have a 50-50 chance of seeing Mech Pilot, which is way better than a lot of the other units in the game. Now, you can do a similar filtering with Lucian, you could do a similar filtering with Gangplank, but it's by far the most efficient on Jarvan, to a point where even though Jarvan is a unit that you can't buy, sell, you are way more likely to just use the fruit removers that you have and find Mech Pilot more efficiently on Jarvan, right? There's also a lot of them that are pretty easy, right? These are like the highest odds ones, like Robo Ranger, for example. If you get that activate on Gangplank, then that really increases your chance, right? Additionally, if you're low level sometimes, but these ones are a little bit more bait, like whatever. Corrosive as well has pretty high odds, and this one's really popular on a lot of tanks. So you don't have to particularly find like Strong Spark. This is one of the more common ones, or sorry, one of the more strong ones that activates, like, you know, a really big percentage removal rate, what you want to call it, right? This is the one that gives you the best odds, but even these ones are good enough, right? You just have to know which ones roughly are the ones that work on Jarvan. For example, Corrosive. Corrosive still gives you like a decent odds of finding the Mech Pilot on the Jarvan. So a lot of times what you'll do is, I'll use a full board just to make it look a little bit more illustrative. What you'll end up doing is you'll have your board here, and then before you start rolling for it, you'll basically just take your unit here. Let's say it's a Swain, and you'll get a fruit on Swain, and you'll pick a tank fruit on Swain. That tank fruit will now block the Jarvan from having a tank fruit, which will give you the higher chance of Mech Pilot. This is the tech. This is what you basically try to do if you're optimizing really heavily, or if you don't have a lot of fruit removers or stuff like that. This is just a way of doing it. Now, you might be asking, okay, well, now I have Mech Pilot on my Jarvan. What do I do? Well, once you have Mech Pilot on one unit, the other unit is guaranteed to see Mech Pilot. So once you have Mech Pilot on Jarvan, you just sell the Swain, right? That's on your bench. You take your other fruit, and now whichever unit you want a Mech Pilot, let's say the Lucian, you put it on this guy. Now he's a Mech Pilot. Then you can finally, as a last step, remove the fruit on the Jarvan, put it onto Senna or whichever other unit you want a Mech Pilot, and then now you have your 2 Mech Pilot activated. It's really convoluted. It's a lot of like weird steps, of course, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit just to give you a guide, because it's something that you might see me doing in some games. It's something you'll probably see people doing in regionals if you're watching the tournament this weekend, and it's something that I mentioned in some of my other videos. Of course, this is advanced tech, you know, quote unquote advanced tech, right? If you're a more beginner player and this is very confusing for you, yeah, it's confusing, it sucks, but you know, that's the set that we're playing, you know, it is what it is. But either way, what you can do instead, like I said, is you can just buy, sell, right? Lucian and Gangplank have decent odds of seeing the fruit. So a lot of times on level 8, you just collect a bunch of Gangplanks. Like you collect some extra Gangplanks, and you can roll the fruit, sell, buy a new Gangplank on your roll down, trust it on him, and that way you can save removers, and it can usually work out to be fine anyways, right? This is just an optimization that just makes sense in certain cases because of how easy it is to get Mech Pilot on Jarvan by filtering out with these rules. Of course, I don't recommend breaking your head too much. This is something that's not going to apply for like 99% of the players and probably 99% of my viewers, but it is just a video that I want to put out there because it is an interesting, at least to me, aspect of the game and something that is a little bit more common, and you might see it more popular on other units as well. Right now, because Mighty Mech is so dominant, it's very popular and it's really important on playing the 7 Mighty Mech to guarantee that you have your 2 Mech Pilot, but of course, it could also be very, very common on other units as well, and a lot of like this filtering mechanic is being more common as it was figured out like a couple patches ago. I think it started in patch 15.5, but it wasn't super relevant until recently because as you can see, the Mighty Mech comp is now like super dominant. It's like the best comp in the game, and a couple patches ago it's like a little bit less common and a little bit harder to play around, but now I'm sure there's like multiple people per lobby that are trying to hit it, and obviously this gives you a really good way of easily finding that that one aspect of the comp where you don't have to worry about low rolling as hard. But anyways, data TFT if you want to play around with this one, and power ups tab on little buddy bot if you want to play around with this one. But that's the gist of it. In short, just buy a tank, put a tank fruit on the tank, then roll on Jarvan, and then remove her and put on the other units. That's basically what we could have summarized this video to. But hopefully that helps out. Have a great day and see ya. Bye bye.